Lisa Flynn is a human systems engineer and PhD candidate at the University of Oulu in Finland. Renowned for her innovative approach in utilizing augmented intelligence for rapid systemic improvement in cybersecurity workforce development. With a foundation deeply rooted in the international tech industry, her expertise ranges from launching technology startups to C-suite paratrooping, all underpinned by a profound understanding of information systems, business models, psychology, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Currently focused on pioneering research in cognitive security, Lisa specializes in human-AI integrated systems engineering. Her efforts are pivotal in developing advanced methodologies to create a responsive, AI-enhanced, deployable workforce, effectively addressing critical gaps in cybersecurity training. In her spare time, she maintains involvement in global anti-trafficking operations, underscoring her commitment to societal impact, but also highlights her adeptness in navigating and influencing complex, cross-cultural environments. Lisa stands at the forefront of technology, security, and human system dynamics, leading the charge to develop the security workforce of the future. And now, here is Lisa.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience this morning as we had a few technical glitches. I love that. But I'm really excited to be here with you. This is the second time that I presented this. This was my research from last term. The first time was to the CAMS community, and I'm really excited to be here, which feels like more my community. And thank you, Matt, so much for inviting me to the party. And also, point of clarification, I was the last holdover. I actually graduated in '99. And then I took some time in the field. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me here, just so you kind of know where I'm coming from. My undergrad was in marketing and psychology, really took a lean into business after that. That led me into entrepreneurship, where I had a few different companies. Some were bootstrapped, some were venture capital backed, some were successes, one was a massive failure. I learned the most in that one. Since then, I was a growth stage fixer and kind of C-suite paratrooper. So I saw a lot of different problems in a lot of different organizations in a lot of places around the world. When the pandemic hit, I was actually working in India on a turnaround operation where I was pretty deep in the supply chain there, in the fast fashion supply chain. And so that had to change, obviously, immediately. In that play, I was also working with anti-trafficking and counterterrorism efforts. So once you sort of sit with women in that space that don't have a choice for dignified employment, it's really hard to leave that and just kind of go back to doing something else. So the pandemic gave me a great opportunity to take a look at, and assess what I was doing and my place in this world, and decided that knowing more about technology, all of my plays had been technology companies. However, I typically wasn't the technical person. I was more of the business person, strategy, development, things like that. So I went back to get my master's during the pandemic in information systems management, as well as specializing in cybersecurity, particularly once Matt and I started talking about cognitive security. I thought that sounded a lot like me. And now I am pursuing a PhD in human systems engineering, where I will get to be researching more of the work that I'm about to show you. So what's interesting here is I didn't want to throw up the usual, magazine articles and things like that. Instead, I wanted to start from the beginning with, I'm talking today about generative AI and how we can use that in the trenches in business and technology, and specifically cybersecurity, to solve a lot of the problems that are happening on the ground. So instead of putting up my greatest hits, I just took a picture of my office, one that you can see behind me, and asked ChatGPT to, and I also, it expanded, it did include a whiteboard or two. And I asked ChatGPT to do a full behavior analysis on the person whose office that was. It spit out a 2-page BAU report that was pretty spot on, actually, for some of the wrong reasons, interestingly enough. So there was hallucination, but they brought it around in the end. And then I asked it to do a bio for someone whose office that was, and see how close it would get. And this is the bio that it showed, which was actually pretty close. You might recognize some of it. I did incorporate some of it into my LinkedIn bio. And then I said, well, this is great. I have a picture, but I don't feel like it's very professional. Would you be able to make my picture look more professional? And GPT said, yes, absolutely. Upload it. So I uploaded the picture of me, just a basic picture of me, essentially, and this is what it returned. I can't see you, but I hope some of you are giggling a little bit. And so I said, well, that's not me. And it said, no, I actually can't change your picture, but this is someone who should be good in cybersecurity. So that's where it left me. So just to say, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that's why the human factor is so important in when we're working with these new generative AIs. Okay, so my objective here is twofold. One, again, I'm going to talk to you about AI. I'm going to point out where generative AI failed me in this presentation. I'm also going to point out the things that it did to really impress me. But what I'd love to hear from you is just kind of the view from above. Is this type of pipeline development and this AI-enhanced model, do you think it would be viable in your environment? Be that industry, education, big company, small company. My intent is for this to be universal. And then whether you think that it would be good or would not be a good fit, why? So what, and potentially what metrics might help me to determine feasibility and viability as we go to, plant these nests in many other places. So before we get started, I just want to discuss the problem real quick. It's interesting because I spend a lot of my time kind of between the trenches and the boardrooms and kind of all the stops in between. And there's a different understanding and a different tone in each of those places. So when you ask someone what the problem, or is there a problem in cybersecurity, if they're not in cybersecurity, they really don't think there's a problem, which is really scary, I think. And if you ask someone in the trenches, what's the problem? Like, that's where this kind of war-torn area where it's like, what do you mean? Everything's a problem, right? And the issue that we're going to be talking about today is a global one. And I think it's something that we're all aware of. We lack the pipeline resources of the talent to lead us into the future cyberscape. And also the future is now. So our current methods are out of date before, and anything that is new, it's out of date before it can even be verified to say that it's safe. Old methods at this point are plain dangerous. We can talk about that in the Q&A if you'd like to. And we know that generative AI is changing this field faster than the good guys can keep up. The result of this is a lack of operational cyber talent. So in other words, we don't have the supply to meet the demand, and it's getting worse every day. Existing programs are not keeping up. They're getting farther behind. No one really has the time or money to deal with this problem. They're already rooted with their own, pretty decent stack of problems in their own silo or in their old field. And basically what happens is if we all keep working independently like that, we're all going to lose. We really need, I use the phrase, never has there ever been a time where we are all in this together more than in cyberspace. We don't know any international boundaries. We don't respect any, corporate boundaries or community boundaries or anything like that. And if the bad guys aren't going to be respecting it, the bad guys will not respect the rules. Right? So we have been shadow boxing kind of on the dark side of the internet ever since we've had the internet, pretty much. And right now, the good guys, we're on our heels a little bit. And this gap where we used to know that the threat actors were, steps ahead of us, that gap's turning into light years ahead of us. And we're busy worrying about what the policy should be or, what should be allowed or what shouldn't be allowed. And the threat actors are not respecting that in any way, shape, or form. So that's the bad news. The good news is the cavalry has arrived. For my Star Wars fans in the audience, we are being rescued right now by our AI companions, and a lot of people are resisting. So the cavalry is here. They don't look like what we expected. Add to that a decent problem that mainstream media has been planting and sowing these deep-seated fear of robots and AI. Are they going to take our jobs? Are they going to kill us all and take our houses? And we need to move out of that binary construct. It is not going to be robots versus humans, AI versus humans. We need to be working together, and that's really the case for augmented intelligence, which we used to call human AI integration. So in my opinion, like moving out of that binary construct, it needs to be both and. It needs to be humans and AI. And the reason that that is so important is because we can have all of, and we do have a lot of really great solutions. We have frameworks, we have plans, we have methodologies. The problem is we're not able to implement that in the field, right? So if anybody has studied project management, somewhere probably, 10% is what they say, 10% of projects succeed. A lot of people take issue with that. They don't think it's that high. And so we really need to be looking into change management. So that's what's crucial on the ground to get the cavalry to be able to actually help us. So project teams and then leadership within those project teams is what the research shows is really going to help us. By that, I mean that when projects fail, they fail for different reasons. But the root cause, if you start to look at the common denominator of the root cause, they're failing because of lack of leadership or poor leadership in the field. Likewise, when projects succeed, they succeed because of strong leadership and well-balanced teams. Do they have their share of problems and obstacles? Absolutely. Oftentimes they have more, but they're able to work together to get around that because they understand that they just have to keep, it's like Dory from Nemo, just keep swimming. So here's what I did about it. Here's what we did. Catalysts and Canaries is a collective impact incubator, and I'm going to get into semantics in just a second. But it's basically addressing a larger segment of the market. We can solve many problems with the same broad strokes. And picture sort of a Venn diagram, right, of everybody who works in your industry. So I tend to look at industry, research, and education, right? And then in the overlap, if we're solving the problems for workforce development for each of those industries, we can do that, at the same time in the same space. And that's where a typical incubator or accelerator model sort of comes from. The problem right now is that everyone is overwhelmed and under-resourced. And that's true for government agencies, that's true for public, that's true for private, that's true for NGOs. And I know that we have research out now that shows that COVID-19 actually had the physiological, symptoms or results. People are traumatized in more than one way, and that doesn't make things easier, let's just say, on the ground. In my particular case, universities don't want to get too involved in business. They have their research, they have their teaching, they have their, gauntlet to run through on the daily. And then businesses, on the other hand, don't want to be involved in education too much, right? They pretty much want these ready-made new hires to come out of their area of education and research and be able to plug in and be sort of plug and play to work. And that's not happening either. We saw this in the past with the marketing revolution, where people who knew, people who had been 20 years in marketing, people who taught marketing, and people who had brand new shiny degrees in marketing and were the top of their class, almost overnight didn't know how to do marketing anymore when digital science first hit the scene. So I am borrowing some of my moves from those from some micro education programs that were meant to be bridger programs. All right, so this, we sort of jumped into the deep end here with this workforce development collective impact incubator. As promised, I'm going to get into some semantics. So I didn't make most of this up. I borrowed from a lot of different places. So the incubator model and the accelerator model are pretty common in tech startup and in high growth businesses. This might sound like an entrepreneurship model within your company. It might be, like I said, an incubator or an accelerator. There's lots of different, a lot of co-working spaces have this element as well. So an incubator is just like what it sounds like. It's a nest, and we're really wanting to protect the early stage, so our eggs. We want to give them the best possible environment to grow before they hatch and fly. Incubators typically don't have it's passive. There's not usually a time frame. It's just about nurturing, and then they do take equity. They have mentors there in a more passive sort of sense, as opposed to accelerators. And this you might have heard of, like Techstars, Y Combinator, a lot of the big accelerator models that kind of came out of Silicon Valley with the second not the dot-com boom, but then the tech and social media boom after that 2.0. These are more fixed-term, intensive programs. They do usually involve seed investment, of course, for a trade of some equity. Mentorship, now they'll bring in specialized mentors to talk to the group, but they don't have the sponsorship, which is really someone upstream who can look out for you, who can find jobs for you, who can say your name in a room. Especially in innovative spaces, sponsors are so important, because in innovative spaces, we are looking at past performance, but not specifically. We're looking at that to see how are they probably getting, we're looking at past performance as a predictor of future behavior, but we're also leaving a lot of room for the potential that is between the lines, and what will this person be able to do in this new space where they don't have a rule book anymore. Okay, accelerators aim to rapidly scale growth. So that's the other important factor there. And essentially, both of these are trying to get these companies out of the very vulnerable, very the odds are they're not going to make it out of the gate. So these are two support models where people in the field that they're going into, or in education or research, says, we want you to survive. And so they help them through this portion. Okay, next we're going to go into collective impact models. I also did not make this one up, but I love it. So basically, it's a structured approach to tackling complex social problems. The big thing, and we can measure it, we measure collectively through continuous communication and a central backbone organization that basically keeps this feedback loop going between all the different entities. Okay, so this is designed for large social change. It can also be designed for change in your home, in your department, at your organization. It doesn't have to be on a global scale, but it definitely can scale to that size as a matter of, as more people join the collective. So when we're starting to look at collective impact for cybersecurity workforce, this basically means we're going to take this model and strategically position it to address the cybersecurity workforce gap by facilitating this sector collaboration, right, for comprehensive skill development. And when I say comprehensive is a pretty standard term, we're also looking at highly skilled, very specific skill development, because we can remain adaptive within by using sort of a mashup of all of these models, which is what my collective impact incubator is. So it'll keep us up to date on not only the field, but the field in whatever specific place the incubator or the new hires or soon-to-be hires are working. So in Las Vegas, we're pretty much ground zero for human trafficking, anti-trafficking. So we had a big weekend just this past weekend where we kind of had the perfect storm of the Super Bowl hitting Las Vegas. And so we did have a pretty impressive counterterrorism collective spun up, working with the NGOs in the area, the law enforcement, hospitals, wraparound services, all of that. And we were able to get through that easier than we have been before because of the communication that was allowed. Okay, so mainly because in collective impact models, you want to manage intersections, because if we overload an intersection, like what you see in the centralized model, the communication is not going to be as good out here at the nodes, and they're all out there on their own. The biggest difference is the outer loop of the distributed network, because it sort of provides a boundary, and we're saying that everybody within this outer loop is committed to stay in the network. Okay, so we're not prioritizing individuality in the system. We're prioritizing the communication between the network to make sure that everybody in there is informed about the job that they need to do. They don't need to be informed about everything. They need to be informed about the job that they need to do. We need to make sure that they're getting the training and that they're communicating with the people that they need to be communicating with, right? But they have constant support. So this is a way that we are more easily able to change things. So to get into a little bit more of the collective impact model, the why, this approach enables systemic solutions because, as you saw in the network, we're all talking. So we can expand that distributed network as wide as we want to create these systemic solutions that are actually combating the systemic problems that we have all over the world right now. In this case, we are prioritizing sustainable pipeline development. How do we know it's sustainable? Because we're building it with the people in the trenches who need it. So this harkens back to, the very fabric of democracy. There was a slogan, "Nothing about us without us." I learned the importance of that when I was in India working in anti-trafficking. And that's very true now in every corner of the world, especially when we're hiring people. So right now our current model has education that's fairly separate from industry, and education is trying to train the people to directly inject into industry and be ready to go. Without the feedback loop, I think you need ESP. So we really want to make sure that people are hearing from the people in the trenches or in mid-management, and it'll come down from the boardroom to make sure that we are creating the cyber workforce that we need today and tomorrow, not that we're creating a cyber workforce that will be immediately outdated as soon as they enter the field. Which makes sense. It's crucial in a field where technological advancements and security threats continuously evolve. Okay, so it's that last statement, the continuous evolution, that generative AI is just not going to stop. And it's going to push us in ways that we've never seen before. We are definitely still in that shadow boxing arena, except for we're just traveling at warp speed within there. So the more that we can have an approach that lets us compare notes, those of us in the field as well as those in research and in industry where they're in a decision-making aspect in industry, is really key to how do we make change. All right, so here's how we did it. Teamwork, at the end of the day, is really what works. So I'm going to point out also, I said I'd eat my own dog food here in terms of that's entrepreneurial speak. So the AI let me down a little bit here on this slide. I put my notes and outline into PowerPoint to make a deck. I would have thought that it would have caught typos or spelling errors. I caught it actually a little bit too late. I didn't catch it immediately. I did catch it before I presented it and wanted to point that out. So again, the case for adult supervision of these AIs as they're still training. So we created a team for Catalysts and Canaries. It was out of the capstone course at UNLV. We had, it's a dual program, so we had management information systems students as well as cybersecurity students, again, finishing their master's degree. So this is the last class of their master's. I also had one just previous graduate join us. I actually met him at DEF CON. We were on the red teaming. The White House had a red team challenge to break the AIs, the generative AIs, which was fun. And so I met him there and just thought he was really great. He had been looking for a job and hadn't had a lot of success at that. And I thought that was silly because he was a standout student. And so I brought him into the incubator to test the job seeker category. And then, like I said, we have 5 students. I had one partner who was a recent graduate in HR, got their MBA in HR with MIS focused classes. And then me, I was actually a current graduate. I graduated last term, and then now I'm on the turn, like I said, to go on for my PhD. I really like this image of the guy with the robot coming out of his back rather than like, you know, the Terminator, the robot coming through the face as we usually see, because again, we're not replacing humans with AI. It would be like letting Doogie Howser run around making decisions on his own. The AI is very, very smart, but they still act like middle schoolers, and so they definitely still need adult supervision. All right. So actually, let me take it back one step. So this team, no, I'm not going to take it back a step. Let's switch into Prompt Engineering 101. This is what I needed to start with the team. Although they were master's students in a technology program last year, they were not very familiar with ChatGPT. I know that there's a lot of the, concern over ChatGPT focuses on students and how they're using it. And I will tell you from my time in the trenches, they're not using it as much as you think that they are right now. And if they are, they're using it in a way that it will be very easy to tell. So we started by teaching Prompt Engineering 101 to this team. It's important to note that the prerequisite to prompt engineering is not computer program language engineering. I don't think. I think that helps. I know Python. I think that it helps if you're able to sort of take a big problem and chunk it down. If you have algorithmic thinking, that helps. Other than that, it doesn't help. In fact, because it's a natural language model, right? So that's a big difference between LLMs and the previous AI that we've had forever. We've had AI in our phones. That's who Siri is. That's what Maps is. Like, that's how we've been able to, really do life for the last, 10 to 15 years. The big difference with the LLMs, the large language models that are these new generative AIs, they're natural language models. So they don't talk like a computer. So I see a lot of old school tech people having a hard time transitioning to this new language. However, I see social engineers and even social engineers in training. So as it applies to jobs that might be taken, the hospitality industry, food and bev, servers, bartenders, they're great at social engineering because they know how to deal with humans. They know how to de-escalate. They know how to handle multiple things at one time. And so they make great, so far in my research, they really make great social engineers because it comes kind of naturally to them. This is helpful also when we want to be applying, I didn't think I named the number of cybersecurity. I think that the latest is that we're going to be 2.5 million cybersecurity professionals short next year, and we're probably somewhere around 800,000 right now in the United States. And those positions are not easy to fill. So you would think that it would be, get your cybersecurity degree, get that job, and that's just not what's happening, partially because of this changeover in what cybersecurity means right now. So again, on the icons on this one, I don't think that my AI did a very good job. The social engineering, it just sort of gave up on what that one was supposed to be. Trickery and deceit, I'll give it kind of a half a point, I guess. Gingerbread men are known for being mischievous, although I wouldn't have thrown that into a cybersecurity day. So social engineering, good prerequisite to prompt engineering. Remember that these generative AIs hallucinate quite a bit, actually, and that's because they want to please you. So you do have to fact check it. You do have to push back. Sometimes I'll say, like I'll literally type that out. That doesn't seem right. Please review the framework of, whatever it was that I was talking. Please review NIST's framework and make sure that this is a good example of how we would recover. Or something like that. You can also have decision-making matrices on hand that you can actually have your AI fact check itself. And we've also, within the program, we had different AIs fact check each other's results. Do not believe that you can put something into AI and ask it if it was generated by a human or an AI. I've done that with papers that have of mine from last century, thanks Matt, that never hit the internet and never were even transferred that way. And it's told me that those were written by an AI. And then I've also had an AI completely write a paper, turn that in, and it said that was original work. So we still we're not doing a great job at hitting that out of the park just yet. The trickery and deceit, you can trick the AI. It's not typically trying to trick you, but you can certainly trick it. That's how we hack it. That's how we get it to do the things that it's not supposed to do. We covered the aim to please, so be careful of that. Sometimes I get a little flattered when I'll put, a paper into AI and say, what do you think? And is this on par with a PhD candidate or anything like that? And it, tells me how great I am. Which is really cool. And then I remember that it's there to tell me how great I am, and I have to then dig a little bit deeper and double check my work. And then lastly, work together. I give a lot of prompts to my AIs. I call them my Robins. Because they're your superhero sidekick. They shouldn't be out roaming the streets and saving the streets alone. They should be doing that at your command. And when you work together, that's what gives you the superhuman speed to get through your research. You can synthesize things faster. You can compare and contrast. You can ask it to say, what am I missing? Ask me questions one at a time until you have enough to fill that in based on this framework, and then go again. So just remember, it's not like a one and done type of a situation. You want to keep talking with it. And so for those of you who are not as high tech in the room, this is my kind of friendly reminder. So we want to be more like Knight Rider, where Michael and Kit, if y'all remember, this is definitely a Gen X thing. They solved crimes and mysteries, and they investigated together as a team. Kit could drive by himself, but he was always in communication with Michael, as opposed to, so that's the way we want to do it. The way that we don't want to do it is in the Terminator, aspect, and where the machines are rising up against us and all the humans are like, that's not the most likely scenario, at least not for the next 50 to 100 years. I can't guarantee outside of that. Okay, so that is the 10 slides that just basically set up the case study that I'm going to present to you. I will take a break right now for questions because I want to make sure that we solidly understand the framework the environment before I go in to talk about the case study. Matt, I'll rely on your eyes and ears and let me know if we have any questions or if we should just move on.
If anyone has a question, just go ahead and raise your virtual hand.
You ready to go?
Yep, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. You guys get the gold star so far. I knew you would. Okay, here's the case study. So the initial scope, it was that team that I talked about a moment ago. So we had our 5 interns. I had one sort of deputy in the HR side, and then we had the one job seeker who acted as a project manager for the rest of the 5 interns. And the initial scope was to implement a pre-established growth plan for a all-star cyber consultancy through product development, framework, and support. So essentially, they're kind of like my team of Avengers. There are 5 cybersecurity analysts and consultants and advisors. Not only in cyber, they also jump to the physical, but utilizing, so for example, surveillance cameras. But now we want to utilize generative AI to help us do better with the surveillance cameras and track and have the surveillance cameras talk to each other. So the framework that I decided to, and they really wanted to grow. So they're a very impressive crew, but they didn't have that solid pipeline, and they didn't feel like it was tough for them to sort of explain what they did to go out and actually target, companies and clients. So I determined that we were going to start a product line. I'm going to tell you about that in just a second. And the product line would basically allow us to land and expand, which is part of our catalytic strategy. So with this team, I identified that they would be able to, that almost every business in town that couldn't afford them needed them. And again, in cybersecurity, if so many businesses in town need security, that's bad news for all of us. CCSD, Clark County School District, is the 5th largest school district in the nation. They're here in Las Vegas. They made some national news actually right after the MGM breach that Clark County School District was breached. The hackers actually sent emails to every person in the school district saying that their data had been breached and that the school district wasn't doing anything about it. It was very interesting. I don't know if Arun's on the call, but he wrote a really great story and is following and tracking that. So they've had issues. We have all of these issues that are, global in terms of not geographically, but in terms of the type of security incidents that we're having and how they really overlap and can become much bigger. So we kind of wanted to use the same strategy and just reverse it. So we said, if we can teach this small team how to drive revenue through specializing in global security operations centers, or GSOCs. Global in a GSOC too, for those of you who don't know, it can be international, but global is referring to the type of security operations. So those are not only cybersecurity, for example, in counterterrorism, human trafficking. What starts online with the grooming and then the control turns into physical when we need to have operation teams go in and intervene. So a GSOCs basically have a threefold purpose. That is to use automated technology to provide integrated intelligence and analytics to monitor security, improve incident response, and mitigate risks. So we said, great. How are we going to get all of Las Vegas to play nicely in the sandbox here, especially cross-pollinating? And the solution that I came up with in the strategy was to implement a sprint, which I don't know if any of you are familiar, but this was developed, in the agile and lean startup days by Google Venture Labs. And basically, how do you solve big problems and test them in just 5 days? So typically, you take a week, and you cover 6 months of work and research and decision making in that time. So again, I didn't make this up. I adapted the book in a customized way to create a playbook this is what actually the team did, to create a playbook for this exact client, modeling the scope and the creation of, should we have a public-private GSOC in Las Vegas? If so, who would be the key stakeholders? Who's willing to, where do we already have the buy-in? Where do we need to work on that? Who are our champions in the field? And what is this going to look like? So that's what I handed to the team after we went through the prompt engineering and basically getting them ready for, we worked on their resumes, their cover letters, how to adapt those, customize those to specific jobs, how to use those to determine if they would be a good fit at the job, because sometimes the job descriptions are very wordy and don't really say a lot. So by the time we got to this point, we had, 4 to 6 weeks left of the term. And what the team did was took the information that we already had and developed this into a 100-page playbook specific, I'm calling it the sock hop now, to run this GSOC sprint. It's actually going to be kicking off in 2 weeks. I know you can't see this. I'm just keeping myself honest here, but I wanted to sort of show you the level of detail that the students were able to put together in this very short time. So they use their generative AI to really understand, we read about GSOCs in one of our classes. So people knew what they were, but not really. As well as no one knew what the sprint was. So they used the time first to familiarize themselves with the sprint and with the GSOC based on talking with their AI. Then we said, we want to adapt this. This is internal use, by the way, so I'm not selling this. I'm not, and it's not a straight sprint. It's basically taking the sprint framework and saying, how can we customize that for this exact use case? What we did was came up with the entire 5-day plan, complete with activities. So, the sprint book would say, do a brainstorming activity with these stakeholders to, as a fast way to make decisions, to get out all the ideas out on the table and then make decisions. Great. What we did then was said with our generative AI, suggest 5 activities that would help, brainstorm and determine this for a sprint, keep the sprint methodology in mind, and send for a GSOC when you are suggesting the activities. These are the people who are going to be in the room, which is, top law enforcement, local to federal level, as well as, the school district, casino, head of security at casinos, kind of all of these security people, to say not only, what activity should we do that would be helpful, but like which one would be best for them. And then they give us 5 and we further explore those. And then we came up with the ones that we thought should be happening throughout these 5 days. All right, so a word on book adaptation. These are, and a word on, we have the solutions. I want to remind people, I'm not saying stop the research at all. That would be silly, but a lot of people's perception is that we're not fixing things because we don't have the solution. And the fact is we do have the solution. We have plenty of them. We just need to get them implemented. You must get permission from the authors before creating a derivative work. So I am showing 4 frameworks and 5 authors that I know do an excellent job in what they do. And if we could just get their thoughts into a training format that would be able to be replicable, and that we can train the trainers, and we can really get, the way I see it is, inoculation to the trenches. You must get permission if you're going to do any sort of book adaptation before creating. It's a derivative work, so it is protected under copyright. However, most people who are using the AIs might not know that, which I'm sure you all saw the lawsuit for a super fan wrote another book basically in the Game of Thrones space, whatever. It's more than a trilogy. I'm not really sure. And that was quickly found and is now being litigated. So if you are an author, up level your search on yourself, and make sure that this isn't happening. If it does happen, you certainly have legal rights there, and would encourage you to pursue those so that we can stop this behavior. On the really bright side of this, if you have a book, if you have a book within 1 week, you could have a really solid course, whether it's a 6-week boot camp or a 16-week course on how to train people. For example, Arun's book, I think in the first couple paragraphs says this, anyone can apply this anywhere. The problem is that they don't. They read the book, they're totally on board, and then it stops at the implementation phase. So for authors, this is an easy way to get past that and get more of your works out to the people who need it. All right. So the results or the traction of what we did with this, the sprint last term, I have a 100% placement ratio. I get to say that because we had one job seeker and we did find him one full-time job. That's actually with the company that is running the sprint. That will serve as the backbone entity, most likely, of this GSOC that we're starting in Las Vegas. We added a new revenue channel to the clients. If they close what's at the table, it's going to have more than a 100x return, which is not bad. We established the Counterterrorism Coalition, identified and vetted 200 plus grants. We developed the package and the development package was created and tested. We're working on a GAI to do that itself now so that we can just supervise. We've developed many prompt packages and injections. We've custom trained the GAIs in education. I now have the entire capstone course this term. 4 of the teams are control teams. 2 of the teams are experimental teams. I'm very excited with our early progress. We have 2 project managers or job seekers, and I like their chances. We already have jobs on the table for them. I'll be teaching an AI and prompt engineering course in the fall. We're running experimentation in kindergarten through PhD level. We have interdisciplinary applications. All of our feedback, our sample size was small, as you saw, but all of the feedback was the written feedback was really excellent, and I think the proof's in the pudding. I had several of my students from last term rejoin this term to stay in to be in the job seeker, and I had a really impressive, to be on the teams this year, you had to want to be on the team, and I'm very pleased with who we have on the team. So we've increased the learning and knowledge and decreased the time spent. And the future is we just want to do more. So Catalysts and Canaries, I've mentioned, I'm off to, I don't think I mentioned where I was going. I'm off to Finland this summer to the University of Oulu to continue my studies here with an international interdisciplinary team that I am so excited about working with their OASIS unit. I am developing more human systems engineering programs as well as AI and prompt engineering programs. I like to train the trainers. I think we need to get as many trainers as we can into the field as quickly as possible. We are testing, like I said, in K through 12 cyber resilience programs. We are running some implementation in Nevada. I hope to have more soon. And then the International Research Collective that we're already working within. And last final plug is we are bringing industry and research. We're trying to really bring the greatest minds in industry and research together, conveniently located in Las Vegas between DEF CON and Black Hat. We do, that's sponsored by NIST, Cognitive Security Institute, UNLV, and Catalysts and Canaries. So if that is something that would interest you, please hit Matt or I up. And what's next for me in my PhD program is to start looking into the quantum aspect of my model. I believe that we can create an algorithmic entanglement within this collective impact model, replacing the very unstable qubit with a very stable collective. And so if anybody really digs physics, I'd love to have some conversations around that. And with that, I'm really looking forward to our discussion. I'd love to hear your thoughts, pick it apart, check my math, and let me know if it's something that you would like to implement in your neck of the woods.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation to the Cognitive Security Institute. You may learn more about topics in cognitive security by visiting us at cognitivesecurity.institute.